What is up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Sunday, December the 3rd. This is the Vol Fanatic Show. I am Michael. Skylar, how we doing today, man?
Dude, we're doing fantastic. It's nice to know that you're not even in the Final Four going into the weekend, so you're not heartbroken afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, as a Tennessee fan, it was kind of fun because we knew that some teams would win, some teams would lose, but there was guarantees that feelings were going to be hurt, and I think we got that today.
we definitely got that today. So just giving you guys a little heads up what we're going to be doing today. So we are going to recap the Power Five games from this past weekend, from championship weekend. Then we're going to go immediately into our reactions for the college football playoffs that came out just 2 hours ago. So
Yes, sir. I'm really looking forward to it. But before we get started, Michael, we always do this every week. Shout out of the week. Who do you have this week to shout out?
So my shout out of the week is going to go to my buddy Noah Rasnick.
Okay.
We were actually playing some Fortnite last night before the big event on there, and he goes, "Dude, I cannot believe that Alabama beat Georgia." He said, "I better be getting some TikTok videos about what you think about all this." I said, "Man, there's going to be some stuff come up this week. We're going to talk about it on the show tomorrow. Tune in, my brother." And he said, "Oh, don't worry, I'll be tuning in." So shout out to Noah. He tunes in every chance that he gets once we have it podcasting.
That's awesome, man. Shout out to Noah. I'm gonna actually shout out, and I'm a cop out. I'm a cop out. I'm gonna shout out the family, man. We went over there last night to watch all the games, and Texas and Oklahoma State. If you watched that game, you knew it was a blowout, really, before the fourth quarter. And so Dad was like, "Well, now what do we watch before the SEC championship game?" I was like, "You could watch mine and Michael's breakdown of the game before the game, kind of see and hear what we have to say about it." Now, I wish you wouldn't have, because we both, I think, chose
We both chose
Georgia.
Georgia.
But you talked about it last week, having it on the big screen. So the family actually put us up on the big screen. We watched it in the living room, and the quality of videos are not perfect, but they're not bad. To sit there and listen to what we had to say, it was kind of funny because I knew what was coming up as it was happening. But regardless, wanted to shout out the family. We had a great time. We kind of did our Thanksgiving a little late due to my family just kind of spreading out over Thanksgiving. We can't, we do ours. Same with Christmas. We always do it a little later or earlier so that it accommodates for everybody. And so we had a good time with that. But
Yeah,
dude,
well, I
without
mean,
further
my immediate family, I mean, we're doing some Thanksgiving as soon as we're done with this today. So, I mean, we
there
still
you
got
go.
Thanksgiving going on too. So, I
Yes,
understand,
sir.
man.
Hey, I love the sacrifices that families make to make it happen, though. Because at the end
Absolutely.
of the day is important. Don't get me wrong, but the family is more important, and so being able to figure out what day works for everybody is always key. But without further ado, man, we got some games to talk about. Before we talk about the breaking news in the CFP, that will be coming up later on the show, as Michael said. But we're an SEC/Tennessee podcast, but Tennessee didn't do anything this weekend. So let's talk about that SEC championship game in Atlanta, Georgia. Some would call it a neutral site field game. Some would say it's definitely a home game
Yeah.
for Georgia. But regardless, 3:30 CBS. Well, actually, it was 4 o'clock, and Bama got the win overall. What are your thoughts, man?
So, this game went kind of how I thought it would, minus, which team actually won the game. I figured that it would be a, back and forth, really good defensive affair with both offenses making plays when they needed to. And for the most part, that's exactly what happened in the game. In the end, Alabama just pulled it out. They actually took the lead. Was it in the first quarter? No, it was in the second quarter. They took the lead and just
That a big
never
second
they,
quarter.
they never looked back.
Yeah. Um, I agree, man. Georgia came out, they scored. Alabama couldn't really get anything going to start the game, at least. And I kind of looked at that. I was like, oh man, Alabama better correct it, and they did. Something that Alabama did, and I didn't notice this until I started kind of looking into the game, is they won the rushing game, 114 total to 78. And a lot of times, when it comes down to these games, especially in the SEC, it's whoever runs the ball the best or the most efficient ends up winning the game. Now, the reason why I want to point out most efficient is because both teams were actually very terrible when it came to running efficiency. Alabama run the ball for 41 times for 114 yards. That's only 2.8 an average.
Yeah.
That's terrible. That's really bad.
And then Georgia ran 31 times for 78 yards, which was even worse at 2.5 yards a carry. So
that's exactly right. So both teams really didn't have a great rushing attack, but I think that's a credit to just how good these fronts are for both teams. Alabama played not so good. In fact, suspect against Auburn. But what's crazy is the last time they won the SEC championship, they went into that game coming off an overtime thriller against Auburn in 2021. It's crazy how history can find a way to repeat itself, and that's exactly what happened. And as a Georgia fan, you wanted the best, you got the best. That was the matchup that's been kind of boiling all season long. And we'll talk about it later. It's just crazy as a Georgia fan to go from number one to where they are now, and it really not be that you got shut out or blown out. I mean, this was a really good game. I mean, all the way to the fourth quarter, you were waiting like, Georgia, when are you coming back? Like, I know you're about to open up, and they did in the fourth quarter. They did what they had to do to get back in that ball game. But two things that really cost them in this game: that missed field goal in the first half,
yes,
and Jalen Milroe icing the game. That's what it boiled down to.
Yeah, that and the penalties. Georgia had, let's see, let me look at it. Georgia had 5 penalties for 56 yards. Bama had 3 for 36. And when you look at that, you're like, that's not that big of a difference. 20 yards worth of penalties is a huge difference in a game.
Yeah.
So, but you're 100% correct. Jalen Milroe, he on that last possession there, he cut back against the grain, broke through 3 defenders, and ended up picking up that first down. And as soon as that happened, I looked at my wife. I said, "Well, that's the ball game right there. Bama just won it." And one thing that I want to mention is, I heard earlier this week there was it was a random person called into the Eric Haynes show and said, so would you say that, especially if Kirby wins this weekend, has he surpassed Nick Saban? Absolutely not. For one thing, Saban has done it for so much longer. But also, when you look at the head-to-head matchups before the game yesterday, Kirby was 1-4, I believe, against Saban. Now it's 1-5, and that one game just so happened to be the national championship game 2 years ago. So, I mean, Kirby still has his struggles against Saban, just like everybody does. I mean, Saban just proved once again that he is still that top dog in the SEC, and not just the SEC, but the entire country when it comes to being a head coach.
I hate that conversation. I hate that question. I mean, how can somebody pass somebody when they're both still coaching, and one clearly has twice, 3 times as many natties at one school? Like,
and not to mention that Nick Saban has been a head coach this current time for twice as long, if not longer than that, than Kirby has. I mean, there's no way that Kirby can pass Saban right now. Now, in the future, maybe after Saban retires, depending on what Kirby does, absolutely, there's a chance for it. But Nick Saban has set that bar so high, it's going to be very hard to reach that.
Well, people were talking like as if Nick Saban's done. Like, the man's not done. And Kirby, and I don't want to sound like I'm crapping on Kirby. There's no other coach that's done what he's done at Georgia, and that's winning 29 straight. Now, unfortunately, that came to a halt against Alabama. That's kind of their kryptonite. But, that doesn't take away from what Kirby's done. And I think Kirby has the potential to be as good as Nick Saban. But that's going to take some time. That's not something that just happens over one season or one off season. Even if they were to three-peat, yes, that's something Nick Saban's never done. But for me to say, okay, yeah, he's surpassed, no, that's not something that just happens from one season to the next. That's going to be a tenure. That's going to be a career, type of conversation when you talk about that down the road. That's nothing that really needs to be brought up now. But look, another thing that I want to bring up about this game, Alabama capitalized on the opportunities. They played a clean ball game, and how rare is it to see Georgia, lose the turnover battle? And I know it was only about 1, But that fumble at like the 15 to 10-yard line was so costly to Georgia. And it's something that you don't see them do. I mean, it was almost like a mental type of fumble. It was like somebody, I don't know, it was like a trick misdirection play where it almost kind of looked like a reverse type of vibe. And, Carson Beck went to hand the ball off and the dude just never even went, grabbed it. I don't know if that was supposed to be a pitch or what.
The way I was going to say, the way that it looked to me is, it was supposed to be a handoff on an end around. And at the last second, Carson Beck realized that, I think it was a bail that he was trying to hand it off to, realized that he was a little bit further away than he needed to be and just tried tossing it. But instead of tossing it to him, just kind of tossed it up in the air. Neither one of them were expecting the other to do what they did. And matter of fact, Carson Beck never even knew that the ball was on the ground.
Even knew. Bro turned around and looked around in disbelief. I mean, he had no idea that it happened. But the timing of that, Alabama taking that, capitalizing on it, there was other things that happened. There was some 3rd and 1s that got stuffed up at the line that you just kind of thought that might be the statement in the game. Overall, Georgia still came back. They never folded. And, this game right here, and I know we're a Vol Fanatic / SEC type of show. I'm in full belief that we might have just watched the national championship.
I agree. I believe this was the national championship right here. In my opinion, these are the 2 best teams in the country, and we'll get more in depth into this whenever we do the basketball playoff reaction later. But I believe these are the 2 best teams in the country that just played. So I'm with you. I think we just watched the national championship right here.
What are your thoughts on Jalen Milroe and the growth that man has had since week 2 to week 14 now? What are your thoughts of that kid?
Jalen Milroe, if he had been playing at this level that he is now at the beginning of the season, would win the Heisman Trophy this year, in my opinion. Just the amount of growth that he has had from – I'll go back to week 1. I know he played well against MTSU in week 1, but you mentioned week 2, that Texas game where he did struggle. The growth that he had from that game to the Georgia game yesterday, it's incredible. Just a fantastic job that the coaches did, being able to coach around him and show him, what some of his strengths and weaknesses are. And credit to Jalen for realizing what some of those strengths and weaknesses are and capitalizing on those strengths during the season to get to the point where he is right now. I mean, I truly believe if he had played at this level the entire year, he'd be in New York and hoisting that Heisman Trophy.
What a lot of people don't understand, especially when it comes to the selection committee, and it got brought up over and over, is everybody was saying this is the same Alabama team that lost to Texas in week 2, that is the same. And I'm like, no, that's not the same Bama team that lost to Texas in week 2.
Oh, absolutely.
This team has grown insurmountably. Jalen Milroe, I'm not even going to say he struggled as much in week 2, as much as he just made some bad decisions in week 2 against Texas. And because of those bad decisions, because of those mental mistakes, the offensive coordinator then really couldn't trust Jalen Milroe in the next few games. I mean, he got sat. He never even played in week 3 against
USF.
Southern Florida. Thank you. USF. And now we have our agreements on why that happened. Regardless, Jalen Milroe got a little bit smarter. Doug got really dirty in the film room. And now he's gained his team's trust back, which I don't know if he really ever lost that within the team. But most importantly, he gained the trust back in the coaches. And now you're seeing a kid that's going out there making plays with his legs and his arm. And not only are Bama winning games, they're actually winning games because of Jalen Milroe. Something that we wouldn't say at the beginning of the year.
No, we said at the beginning of the year, at least I know I did. I'm not going to speak for you, but I said at the beginning of the year, the only way Alabama was going to have success this year is if they went back to the team that they were back at the beginning of Nick Saban's coaching tenure, when you had Derrick Henry, you had Mark Ingram, you had Trent Richardson, you had those big studs at running back. You were expecting Alabama to just pound the ball this year, focus on that running game. To an extent, they did, but it was with Jalen Milroe in that running game. But as soon as that passing game came around, and I believe it was the Tennessee game that I first said it, or maybe it was a week or two before that. When the passing game came around, I said I'm going to throw myself a little bit of a bone. I said if we see this team for the rest of the season, Alabama is going to be scary at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's a lot reminiscent to like Jalen Hurts' first year, his freshman year at Alabama, when they could start making some play calls where it becomes 11 on 11, not 10 versus 11. When they incorporate Jalen Milroe into the game plan and running the ball and let him make the decisions on the fly, whether it's a bootleg or a read option or whatever, that's when Alabama's offense becomes that much more dangerous. And just to see the mentality, like of Jalen Milroe, man, something clicked in the second half of that Tennessee game, unlike any other click I've ever seen in my life, where this team just got it. I don't know what it was, but they got it. They came back, beat Tennessee by 14. And yeah, they've had some close games. Don't get me wrong, but you're going to have close games along the way, especially when you're playing in the best conference in college football and when you're playing in one of the most historic rivalries and in-state rivalries, mind you, against Auburn. It's Auburn, no matter how bad they are, is always going to give their best shot against Alabama. But Alabama, if they have proven that if they can just get through that game with a win, they have every ability and opportunity to win the national championship. And I think we're seeing that. Now, let's turn this thing over to Georgia.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's talk about Georgia a little bit.
Let's talk about Georgia. This game wasn't a terrible game by any means. You lost by 3 to the second best team in the SEC, which is now the first best. I grant you that. But, you coming in, you almost think, especially in years past, if you're undefeated, get to the SEC championship, you're almost guaranteed in, right? Mm-hmm. But this year is a little bit different. Circumstances are a little bit crazier in the sense of we've not had that chaos moment that the playoff kind of takes care of itself, right? So they go in, I don't know, Carson Beck had a decent game, man. He was 21 of 29, 243 yards. He didn't have a touchdown or interception. I get that. But that's where Kendall Milton kind of stepped up in the red zone and had 2 touchdowns rushing the ball. They did have that very costly fumble. But overall, as a team, man, they didn't play bad. In fact, their defense showed why they were, one of the best in the country. And their offense found a way even when Alabama seemed to have their number for 3/4 of that football game.
Absolutely. But the one thing that I look at is, you see a couple of players on Alabama's side that, they had a few more yards than everybody else. Like you've got Alabama receiving numbers. You had Isaiah Bond with 79. Then the next closest was Jam Miller and Jermaine Burton, both with 28. So you had a couple of guys on Alabama's side and, running the ball. Roydell Williams, 64 yards. Next closest was Milroe with 29. So you've got a couple of guys that look like they stepped up a little bit more. And I know that Georgia all year long has been a, well-rounded team. Everybody is going to step up. But each game you have had one player that just kind of stepped up and took over a little bit. You don't see that for Georgia in this game. Running the ball, you had Kendall Milton with 42 yards, Dejon Edwards with 38. So, pretty much even right there. You had Brock Bowers was your leading receiver. He had 53 yards. You did have Arian Smith with a 51-yard grab.
I was going to say he had that one long grab.
Yeah, that was insane. But, Ladd McConkey, 38. Rosemary Jack Saint, 30. Dominic Lovett, 23. You didn't have just this one standout guy that said, I'm going to step out. I'm going to, take over this game. I'm going to be this playmaker that this team needs in this game. And credit to Alabama for that. They held each of these guys in check. But, Georgia has relied on at least one guy kind of stepping up and stepping out in a game, and you didn't have that in that game yesterday. You just had a bunch of guys that did their job, but nobody kind of went over the top there to finish getting that job done.
Which is kind of crazy to see because you've seen them rest their players against Georgia Tech in hopes that they would be fully healthy for this game. Now, we'll continue this conversation, but we got some people fired up in the chat. We got Robert, Sean, thank y'all for tuning in. Thank y'all for commenting. Robert came in and said, hey, guys, happy Sunday. What's up, Robert? How you doing? And he said, heck of a SEC championship game. Hard to believe that the Dogs are not going to the playoffs. Got to give it to Bama. They did it. Look, we're going to talk about the CFP in the second half of the show. We'll get to that. Trust me, because Sean even mentioned that he's going to go out on a limb and think that Bama and Texas are going to rematch in the national championship game. He thinks it's going to be a shootout between the two teams. Now, we're not going to even predict the CFP today. We're just going to talk about the reaction of who they've chosen. And that kind of is it kind of is I guess a leaker, which everybody knows. I mean, everybody that follows the sport knows exactly who made it, but we're gonna comment on it later. And Robert agrees with Sean. But I appreciate you guys tuning in. Y'all stay active in the chat. We appreciate you guys. But yeah, Georgia, man, it's very surprising not seeing that takeover guy. I mean, to be honest with you, I've never seen a better tackling performance from both teams. As soon as somebody got the ball, or even if a running back got a little bit of room, they got him on the ground, whoever it was. And that's something that you don't really see. Usually there's a blown assignment or something like that, but really didn't happen too often. And even if somebody did catch the ball in space, the defense would always make a great open field tackle, and that's on both sides of the ball. And
I credit that to coaching.
Oh, yeah. Well, you had the two best coaches in the league going off against each other in the SEC championship game. I hate to make it sound like I'm a homer. I don't like either one of these teams. So please, by all means, like, I'm not sitting here, glorifying Georgia or Alabama. I'm just saying, like, if we're being realist, man, I think somebody said it today in the committee, the show or whatever. I think the SEC's won like 14 of the last 17 national championships. And that's not just with one team. That's not with two teams. That's with Florida, LSU, Georgia, Alabama. I mean, like, look, there's a reason why the SEC has, I guess if you want to call it bias, but it's not even bias. It's just facts, man. National championship contenders are born out of the SEC. And it wouldn't shock me at all if Alabama is the second team to be the number 4 seed and end up winning it all. It wouldn't shock me at all. But Georgia, man, as a fan, all the discussions last night leading into this morning, and I think most Georgia fans that I'm following on TikTok just knew that they weren't going to be in the Final Four. And I was kind of in disagreement, and but I want to talk about it so bad.
I was gonna say I think we've touched on most of the game here. Yeah. I feel like all that I want to say now is just my reaction to the CFP.
It's crazy, dude.
If you're good with it, let's go ahead and move on to the next game. That way we can get to our reactions.
Yeah, because we got other games to talk about. By the way, we sucked in our picks, by the way, all weekend long.
Yeah.
Michael, do you want to tell the folks what we ended up getting record-wise? I wish you wouldn't, but go ahead and do it.
So first off, I just want to say the reason that we don't pick other big games, that we just pick SEC games, is we only watch the SEC like throughout the season. So when we went last week and decided to do these, do all the Power 5 championship games, I had a feeling that something might happen. I didn't think that we would get the chaos that we would, but anyway, Skylar went 2-3 in his picks last week. He correctly picked Texas and Michigan. I went 1-4 because I picked the Oklahoma State upset. So we did not do good last week. And the thing that makes it worse is neither one of us got the SEC game right either. We both picked Georgia in that one. So by far our worst week of the year. But the overall records, they speak for themselves. Skylar is sitting at 98-27 now after last week. I'm sitting at 94-23 overall. So I'm 4 games back. Well, we still got bowl games left. I can make it come back. So
we're only doing the SEC bowl games, by the way.
Yeah, only the SEC bowl games, absolutely.
And in the playoff. But no, man, it's been a fun season. It's been that much more of a reason to watch some of the games that maybe we wouldn't necessarily watch. Is because of this show right here and to see how we do. But let's talk about that Friday night game, that Pac-12 championship game between Oregon and Washington, in a game where Washington got the first win in the regular season against Oregon, and everybody since that day, have power rated them or whatever. They just always believed that Oregon was a better football team. They just didn't capitalize on the mistakes.
I did. I thought Oregon was a better team.
Everybody did, dude. But what does that say about Washington to go in the rematch and beat them basically the exact same way, 34-31 in the Pac-12 championship game? So
first off, before we get into this game, I just want to give a credit to the Pac-12. The last year of the Pac-12. Yeah. And I don't know if they've always done their championship game on a Friday night, but for them to do it on a Friday night in the last year of the Pac-12, all eyes are on this game. Credit to them. I mean, there was literally no other game that was there was a a group of 5 game that was on at the same time, but there wasn't anybody watching that when this game right here is on. So credit to them. But I mean, Washington just came out and punched Oregon in the mouth right off the bat. They went up 10-0 to start this game, and they never looked back in this game. I mean, Oregon did make it close after a 14-point third quarter where Washington did not score, but even when that adversity came, Washington never surrendered. And
No.
I do want to point out one thing that I believe it was Kirk Herbstreit said on the broadcast. He said, one advantage that Washington probably had in this game is when you look back at those games since these two teams played the first time, Washington has played in numerous, one-score games, which is why people thought that, that's why people thought that Washington wasn't as good as they really were. And I feel like, and Kirk said the same thing, he feels like that helped Washington in this game because as soon as it got down to that close game, that's the kind of game that Washington was comfortable playing in, where Oregon has just been blowing people out. They haven't had to play that close ball game. So,
and Washington never really had that adversity hit other than the third quarter, but they really didn't, they wasn't the team that fell behind by 2 scores right off the bat. You know what I mean? Like they jumped out to that early lead. Washington shut down Bo Nix in that first half right out the gate. You're talking about Bo Nix, who not only has something to prove as far as trying to make a playoff spot, that kid is competing for a Heisman Trophy. And for him to get completely shut out, now he ended up having a decent game, but for him to get shut out in the first half the way that kid did was a statement by Washington. And a Washington team, by the way, that doesn't have the greatest defense. The Pac-12 teams are kind of known for not having great defenses, but yet Washington came out, made a statement early. Like you said, they did have a rocky third quarter where they went pointless. And in a game where you scored 10, 10, 0, and 14, they had a terrible third quarter. But they found a way, like you said, it kind of got dirty. It got within that one possession game, and Washington found a way.
My big note in this game right here. So Washington, I don't remember where exactly they've ranked, but Washington was ranked like around the 63 mark as far as total defense and rushing. And Oregon is like top 15, if not top 10 in rushing defense. Washington outrushed Oregon in this game 157 to 124.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because I was wanting to bring that up. And it would have been a lot worse if it wasn't for Bo Nix's legs. He led his team in rushing with 69 yards. If it wasn't for Bo Nix, Oregon's actual true rushing attack, they only had 55 yards. Washington, on the other hand, Dylan Johnson had 28 carries for 152 yards himself. I mean, Washington just won up front, man. I mean, I know we always say that they won in the trenches, and yeah, that's going to lead to them winning the game overall. But I don't think the difference in the running style. Bo Nix absolutely helped balance that a little bit, but overall in true running game and in true running fashion, Michael Penix was helped out a lot more than Bo Nix was because of the true running game that they had to go off play action and whatever to help the offense sustain some success throughout the entire game. Bo Nix really just had to kind of put the team on his shoulders and get to work. And he did that. I don't want to sound like he didn't do that, but overall it wasn't enough in the rematch. I give Washington a ton more credit just because it's always hard to beat a team twice. I mean, look at Georgia, Alabama. If they were to rematch again, Georgia probably wins that game. And it's happened before. Like Georgia has lost to Alabama in the SEC championship, gone on and won the national championship, and vice versa. I think that's how it happened. Because Nick Saban has not lost the SEC championship game in a while. But it hasn't happened like that, though, because Kirby has only beaten Saban once, and that was that one year whenever they turned around and beat him in the national championship. That's what I'm saying, though. But that was the year that they lost to him in the SEC championship, right? It was Stetson Bennett, 2021. No, Bama won in the SEC championship. Exactly, and then rematched. Okay, I thought you were saying the other way around. I thought they rematched in the national championship. They did. But I thought that you were saying that it happened vice versa too. That that Georgia won one year in the SEC, and then Alabama won in the. Fair enough. That's what I thought you were saying. That's my bad. I said too much. I suck at this job. But no. So like, if they were to rematch again, I think it could happen. I think Georgia could probably win that game. So you kind of went into this game thinking, okay, Oregon's going to win this game because it's a rematch, and you would say they're both evenly, matched up, right? And Washington was like, I don't care what you think, I'm still going to beat them, and they did. And that's why, I mean, I even vouched to have them as the number one team in the playoff. But hey, it is what it is. They got it done against Oregon. I'm not even sure where they failed to be honest with you, but I know they're out of the top 6 for sure, top 8 maybe. But
here's a big note that I just looked at in this game. So third down efficiency. Oregon was 3 of 10 on third downs in this game. Granted, they were 2 for 2 on fourth downs. So, on the money downs, they were 5 of 12 overall. Washington was 10 of 15 on third downs in the game. They were 0 of 1 on fourth down. So, 10 of 16 on the money downs. But you're converting. Let's see, that's like 60% of your money downs right there. That's insane. That is insane percentage there. Washington just did exactly what they needed to in this game. And, you brought up the defense part of it. Washington has struggled on defense so far this year. And that was a lot of the talk going into this game was, how good Oregon's defense is, how Oregon is going to be able to step up in this game and, not necessarily shut down Washington, but slow them down enough. And, you mentioned it. Washington they took offense to that. And they said, we're going to prove to everybody, just how good we are. And they went in and completely shut down Oregon for the first half. Now, Oregon did get some things going in the second half, but Washington got the stops whenever it mattered.
Yep. And they played complimentary football. They had that one long punt return, like 30-something yards to help set them up. They actually lost the turnover battle. They both had one interception, I believe, and Washington had another fumble in the game, if I'm remembering correctly.
It was just 1-1. There was, I think that fumble that you're talking about got overturned.
Okay, well, it's in the box score, but anyways, regardless, they played complimentary football in all 3 phases, which helped them in a gritty game get the overall win. I would like to say Robert pointed out that Washington has something to prove. I didn't realize this, but they were 9.5-point dogs to a team they've already beaten this year.
Yeah, I did know that going into it, and we like to watch Josh Pate on Late Kick Live, and he mentioned that he does a power rating, not a ranking each week, and he said that he would. I think he had Oregon favored by 8.5 in the game, something like that. I mean, it's crazy just how everybody, including Vegas, just thought, there's no way Washington wins this game. Oregon is going to be favored on a neutral site. They're going to win this game the second time around. You got the revenge factor. And, I can't say it enough. Washington they took offense to that, and they said, we're going to prove it again. And they really did. And kind of like in the in Alabama-Georgia game, that final drive, Washington had the ball, and Oregon just couldn't stop, what's his name, Dylan Johnson. Dylan Johnson picked up the first down there at the end that sealed the deal, and that was it.
Big win for Washington. Congratulations to them. They are officially the number 2 seed in the rankings. I know I said we'd talk about it later, and we will. Trust me. But let's move on to where do you want to take this thing? To the Big Ten championship game? That was absolutely the most boring game I've ever watched in my life. Or
we'll do the Big 12 championship because it was the first one of the day yesterday.
That's right. Okay, yeah, let's do it. Big 12 championship, Oklahoma State, Texas. I just want to hear your overall thoughts. Texas got a big win, 49-21 over Oklahoma State, who actually beat Oklahoma earlier in the year in Bedlam. So big statement win. Your initial thoughts?
So talk about a team that just come out and punch somebody in the mouth. Texas, after Oklahoma State got the ball to start, Texas just could not be stopped en route to a 49-21 win over Oklahoma State. Quinn Ewers, shout out to him, the best game of his career. He also set a new Big 12 championship game record with 4 passing touchdowns. I believe 452 yards was also a Big 12 championship game record. something like that.
What's crazy about that stat right there is he had 452 yards in the entire game. I think he had 300 and something by halftime. I think the kid had like 330 passing yards by halftime.
You're probably right because Texas had 35 points at halftime and honestly should have had 42 on that last possession of the first half. But
but go ahead. That was insane. What a performance by Quinn Ewers.
And then the rushing attack for Texas was on one as well. I mean, you had Keelan Robinson with 4 carries for 75 yards, and then C.J. Baxter doing his work of 13 carries, 43 yards, and Robinson had 2 touchdowns. Baxter had another touchdown. I mean, it was just an all-around great effort from Texas in this game. You had 2 receivers go over 100 yards in the game. Adonai Mitchell had 109 yards on 6 receptions. Jatavion Sanders, 8 receptions for 105 yards. Then you had Xavier Worthy with another 86 yards. I mean, like I said, just great all-around effort, along with how Texas defense was just flying around on that side of the ball. It was just a bad matchup for Oklahoma State in this game.
Texas smelled blood in the water. That's what it was. I mean, the game started. If you truly watched the game, I'm not saying that you didn't. I'm saying that Oklahoma State got punched in the mouth real quick. There were some missed calls / some no calls that Mike Gundy was fired up over, and Texas didn't give a damn. Excuse my language, but they said, you know what? There's missed calls. There's no calls. It happens in every game. It's what you do after that defines your team. And Texas proceeded to just absolutely whoop the crap out of them. And Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State Cowboys had a fantastic season. They made it to the championship game, but unfortunately couldn't overcome those setbacks or whatever you call it. And overall, man, Texas they wanted in. They were at number 7, and I'm sure that was – I never understood why they put Ohio State at number 6 to begin with, because everybody and their mama knew that if Alabama, Texas won, they would jump Ohio State. So they shouldn't have ever done that in the first place. But I didn't know this, but no team sitting at 7 or 8 had never, ever, ever made the jump to the playoff.
And now 2 of them
if you're Texas, well, yes, now, but I'm saying if you're Texas going into this championship game and you're at number 7, you're thinking in your mind you have to do absolutely everything possible to get in. You know what I mean? And that's without hoping for help. Alabama had to hope for help. Ohio State has to hope for help. Florida State had to hope for help, and unfortunately, Texas decided to say, hey, we're going to do this on our own. We don't care about how the rest of the teams play out or games play out. And they had a complete game, man. Just an overall complete game. We've said it again. They scored 49, and that was taking the foot off the pedal, honestly, in the second half. I am curious, because this really has nothing to do with like the playoff or anything. They had a chance to bring in Arch Manning as the backup quarterback. Quinn Ewers went down. I think had a little stinger or something. They had a chance to bring in Arch Manning, but didn't. And I thought he was the second string quarterback of that team. Am I just wrong in that assumption?
Oh, he was third string. After the spring game that he had, he looked terrible in the Texas spring game. And Malik Murphy was the second string. And whenever Quinn Ewers went down earlier this year with that AC sprain, Malik Murphy was the guy. Now, Arch Manning did come in a few times because Malik Murphy either had to come out or I think he might have gotten hurt at one point as well. And, Arch Manning has looked fine whenever he's come in this year, even in garbage time. But compared to Ewers and Malik Murphy, he hadn't looked like that guy. So, yeah, he's third string on this list.
Yeah, I got you. All right. Well, let's talk about Oklahoma State just for a little bit because we've got one of those, a.k.a. Josh Pate would say, padlock stats. But what if I told you that Oklahoma State only ran the ball for 31 yards in this game?
I'd say there's no chance that you win that game.
No chance, brother. Once you become one-dimensional, it's pretty much downhill from there. And Alan Bowman did all he could to give us a game. Going 22 for 38, not super accurate with the ball, but he had 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. Man, Oklahoma State rushing the ball, 18 carries as a team, and that's counting. I get maybe some sacks, but 31 yards. That's a good average for 1.7 yards a carry. That's not going to cut it. Their longest run of the game was 9 yards.
Yeah.
That's just not going to cut it. That's not going to cut it. Texas is all around, all three phases, just played at the top of their game. And congratulations to them on the Big 12 championship. It's going to get harder for them. They're making that move to the SEC next year. So I'm glad they ended with a bang.
Absolutely. And you know, there was actually, and there could be more than this, but I know for sure 3 teams that won their conference championship yesterday are no longer going to be in that conference next year. So you've got Texas won the Big 12, and they're going to be in the SEC. Washington and Oregon, you know, whoever won that game, they aren't going to be in the Pac-12 next year. They're both going to be in the Big 10. SMU beat Tulane in the American Championship yesterday, and SMU is going to be in the ACC as of next year. So 3 teams in their final year of the conference went out with a championship win. But talking about Oklahoma State for a minute, you know, I do want to give credit to Mike Gundy because I don't know if you know this, but going into the season, Oklahoma State's over/under win loss or wins going into the season was either 5.5 or 6.5 through FanDuel, and Oklahoma State just went out and won 9 regular season games this year.
Well, yeah,
and made the Big 12 championship.
And you lost your starting quarterback for him to go be a second string quarterback at Ole Miss, right? I mean, wasn't Spencer or no?
Yeah, Spencer Sanders. Yeah. He was the starting quarterback, and I think that he lost like half of his starters overall from offense and defense, and he just a team that was decimated. He just that tells me that, you know, like him or not, Mike Gundy is a good coach. He might go off on these tirades here, and you know, the "I'm a man, I'm 40" thing, which by the way is one of the best things from my childhood.
Oh, absolutely.
But you know, like him or not, he is a good coach. What the fact that he could take a team that was decimated like that, and I know he got transfer portal guys in. That's a big credit to the transfer portal. But he took a team that was decimated and made the Big 12 championship this year. And this team could have laid down at the beginning of the year after getting just blown out at home by South Alabama. 31
That's what I was going to say. Didn't they lose to an American? Yeah. No, I agree with you, man. And for him to be able to turn that thing around, and that Oklahoma win's by far the biggest game. You know, that because that's what got them into the Big 12 championship game. And Robert comment, man, everybody's pushing for that Texas versus Bama rematch. You know, he's saying that Texas is a really dangerous team. They're getting hot at the right time, and I don't disagree with it. I thought maybe in the eyes of the committee, though, that Texas, you know, having that loss against Oklahoma, that's one of the worst losses out of any of the big, you know, the top 6 teams. You know what I mean? So I was wondering if that would hurt them, but them having that wild card win over Bama is what absolutely carried them into the playoff, on top of this absolute dominating performance in the Big 12 championship game. But last thing I'm going to say about this before we go into the next game, did you hear the commissioner of the Big 12 when they were going to award Texas the trophy, and all the crowd and the fans in the background were chanting SEC in the background?
I actually did not hear that. So I left the house with about 3 minutes left to go in the game. I had to run up to the dollar store and get something. But my wife told me about it whenever I got back. She was like, they started chanting SEC, and then he got booed and all that. I was like, I had no idea about all this.
It's safe to say that their fan base is going to at least fit in pretty well with the SEC. So, big game for Texas. Congratulations to them. They are in the playoff. Let's move it right along. What's the next game you want to talk about?
Let's talk about Michigan and Iowa. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I'll be honest, I did not watch this game. I watched the Louisville Florida State game, but I just want to point this out at the beginning of it. So, you know that it was actually plus money on FanDuel for Iowa to have any points in the game. Like if you bet that Iowa was going to score any points in the game, you would have had plus money in that. So like I don't know what the odds were, but let's just say you bet $10. I think it was like plus 200 something odds. So you would have won like 20 something dollars off of that if you bet that Iowa was going to score any points in the game.
Yeah, there was a sports bar I believe, in Iowa that was given free.
Yes, they were giving free drinks until Iowa scored a point. So they literally gave out free drinks the whole game.
They never scored a point. And what's crazy is I believe we called this. I think we both said that Iowa just doesn't have the offense to score. And we believed that Iowa had a good enough defense to really prevent Michigan from doing too much. And overall, the end score looks 26-0. But if you watch that game, man, that was so ugly. There were so many punts in that game. It was, I think, 21 punts. I don't know if it was that game and the other game. I think it was maybe Louisville, Florida State, Michigan, Iowa, like combined 21 punts in the first half. It was stupid. It was not fun to watch. It was
Tory Taylor for Heisman, Iowa punter.
Yeah, the average. Hey, he's probably got the most yards in the team. I'll be honest. It's insane. It's
probably he averaged on 7 punts yesterday. He averaged 50.4 yards a punt.
God, dude had 1,000 yards of punting. That's insane. No, man, it's the fact that game was so predictable and it ended up playing out the exact way that the teams have pretty much been playing all year. That's rare to see. You know, we say this all the time. A game, you know, like the game itself doesn't really go from week to week. Like, I don't know how the word's losing me, but like whatever happens in one week doesn't necessarily translate to the next.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it translated like perfectly in this game. I mean, Iowa has never been a big scoring offense. In fact, I don't even know if they average 17 points a game, even though they were 10-2. It's just their defense has been that good. And honestly, Michigan's a lot of the same. Michigan's offense isn't overpowering. In fact, if they get into a shootout in the playoff with any team,
they're going to get beat.
See them winning. Yeah. And so, but their defense is carried it. It's kind of weird that the Big Ten, we're talking about good defenses rather than explosive offenses. It's a big difference.
Yeah,
this year.
But I will say this, you know, you look at the total yards overall for both of these teams, it's not that far off. So Michigan had 213 yards overall. Iowa had 155 yards. So there was just barely over 400 yards of total offense. It didn't even get to 400 yards of total offense between the two teams.
No.
But you know, it's pretty even with that point right there. But you know, you mentioned the padlock stat earlier that Josh Pate would say. Iowa, 3 turnovers in the game.
Yep. That'll do it. And both teams didn't run the ball well. Even Blake Corum didn't really run the ball well. He had a couple touchdowns. So before I get attacked, don't say that, you know, he had a good game. The problem is he only averaged 3.3 yards a rush. He only had 52 total carries. I mean, the defenses were insane, dude. J.J. McCarthy had, I guess, what would be considered his type of average game, going 22 for 30 for 147 yards and no touchdowns, no interceptions. Just kind of writing the shit, right? Just don't screw up, right? Just keep going, you know, kind of follow the stream of the river, just get to the end of it. And, you know, that's what they did. Unfortunately, Iowa had chances, by the way. I don't want to sit here and talk about the fact that Iowa, I believe it was Iowa, they had a turnover on Michigan's side of the ball as they were probably going to score. I may be confusing another game because I was flipping back and forth, but
you could be right on that because, like I said, it was Iowa had 3 turnovers and Michigan.
Yeah, they had 3 fumbles. Yeah, and they lost all 3 of them. That's not going to do it. So, but regardless, this game was pretty much as advertised. It happened as we all kind of assumed it would. So big, you know, hats off to Michigan on capping the perfect season. They could have been one of those teams that kind of choked and costed themselves a chance at the playoff spot like somebody else did. But they didn't. They won, and hats off to them. I think they're now the number 1 seeded team in the college football playoff.
So the last game of the day is the ACC championship game, and this game lost a lot of momentum that it had back earlier. Florida State ends up beating Louisville 16-6, and if I was to ask you before the games were played, which game do you think more points were scored in, the Michigan-Iowa game or the Florida State-Louisville game? Which game would you say?
I think you'd be dumb to not take the Louisville-Florida State game.
Louisville and Florida State scored less points in that game than Michigan scored in the Iowa game. Michigan had 26 in the Michigan-Iowa game. Of course, Iowa didn't score. and combined, Florida State and Louisville had 22 points overall.
It's so see, I'm trying to separate the conversation between the CFP recap or discussion versus the actual game recap, because as a Florida State team that they're on the third string quarterback this week only, due to a concussion to the second string, and Rhoda something, I can't remember his last name.
It's something like that.
Rhoda Maker or something.
Yeah,
like
I think Rhoda Maker is right.
Yeah. So you knew this was going to be kind of a more different style of offensive game plan, because you know you got to go in there and get the win. And they executed. Yeah, it was ugly, right? But they went in there, they shut down Louisville's offense, which is a credit to Florida State's defense, right?
And I've said all season long that Florida State's defense was good. I mean, the way that they shut down LSU in game one this year, that defense it's amazing for Florida State. But when Jordan Travis went down 2 weeks ago, I said, Florida State might win out, but it's going to be questionable. It's going to be questionable at the end of the year what's going to happen, because this is a different team without Jordan Travis.
It is, and the fact that they didn't really I'm not going to say they didn't control the game, but the fact that they didn't go out there and make a statement, kind of like Texas did, right? And that ultimately cost them a spot in the playoff. Look, Louisville scored 6 points and was about to score a touchdown in the game before it got picked off in the end zone. Now, it got picked off in the end zone, right? Florida State did what they needed to do to keep them out of the end zone. The problem is now you've left it up to the committee, which is something that I've preached that you should never, ever, ever do, is leave your future in the hands of the committee. Some people argue, well, they were undefeated. Okay, but winning the ACC as an undefeated doesn't mean near as much as winning the Big Ten or the SEC as even a one loss. And the reason why, and Florida State fans need to really, and I've said this over and over, but I'm kind of getting into the CFP recap. So I'll save that for later. The game itself, Brock Glenn, this is what costed it, right? Even though they won the game, their quarterback was 8 of 21 for 55 yards.
Yeah.
He averaged 2.6 yards a pass. That's worse. You wouldn't take that running the ball, much less passing the ball, right? But I do credit the guys that stepped up. I mean, I don't know how to say his last name, but Lawrence Toafili or something like that, I don't know, had a crazy game, and Trey Benson did pretty good. And they stepped up and they got the win, and I credit them for that. But Louisville, for the ACC to say that Louisville is your second best team in the conference, it's not good. I don't know. It's my take.
People talked about the SEC being down this year, but the ACC was way down this year. I mean, when you got Clemson going 8-4, and like you mentioned, Louisville is your number 2 team, and they're sitting at 10-2 going into that game. I mean, you had Louisville. We mentioned this last week. Louisville, the number 2 team in the ACC, gets beat by the SEC East 5th seed in Kentucky.
Yeah.
I mean, that tells you that the level of competition difference there.
And granted, it's a rivalry game, right?
Yes.
But then you also have the SEC East 6th place seeded team go toe-to-toe with Florida State that same weekend. And I'm just, I don't know, man. The level of competition is so different. And I know that I'm probably going to get some shade for saying what I'm saying about Florida State. But overall, man, you've seen the difference, right? You've seen the difference without. And this is honestly a huge credit and testimony to what Jordan Travis was to that game, to that team. And losing him, and you've seen how they lost that 4th and 5th gear. They were stuck in 2nd and 3rd at that point. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunate, man. They're undefeated. Yes, they deserve it. But as we all know, the College Football Committee really came out, put their foot down and said, deserving is one thing, the best is another. And so this game, I don't really have much else to talk about because I'm so fired up over the playoff committee. I just want to kind of get your thoughts on if we should move forward or if you have anything left for this one.
That's all I have. Before we move forward, I do want to, appreciate Robert on this. He said I had a good point. Oklahoma State was a lot like Missouri this year. They're supposed to be a sub 500 team or right at 500, and they excelled this year. So I mean, they both of those teams took what they had and just did what they needed to this year. And they had years that nobody thought would happen. But the only other thing I had before we move forward is we forgot to mention it in the Alabama Georgia recap, but a big shout out to Will Reichard. He became the FBS all-time leading scorer yesterday.
That's right. Is that Alabama's kicker?
Yeah, Alabama's kicker. So
is that not crazy to think about? Because in years past, when we think about Alabama kickers,
well, even Will Reichard has had his moments. Tennessee game last year.
Yeah,
and actually, they said yesterday that his past 6 attempts before that kick that ended up giving him the record, he had missed 3 of his last 6 attempts. So I mean, he was on fire to start the year. He didn't miss a single kick, and then in the last couple of games, his last 6 attempts, he missed 3 of them. So, but a shout out to him for becoming the FBS all-time leading scorer. So let's go ahead and move forward. This takes care of our recap of the conference championship games. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of all this.
Let's do it.
CFP reaction. So at 12 Eastern, 11 Central, college football playoff selection show came on, and they announced that Michigan is the number 1 overall seed. And, considering what they did this year, where they sat, credit to them. I won't say that they necessarily deserved it, based on some other teams' showings, but they were right there all year long. I think it's right that they moved them up to number 1. Number 2, you have the Pac-12 champion Washington, who all they did was win this year. Even in the Oregon revenge game, we thought that Oregon was going to come out and get the win and knock Washington out, and all Washington did was just go out and win that game. So Washington's number 2 seed. Number 3 seed is your Big 12 champion, Texas. They jumped from number 7 after Georgia lost.
Florida State. Florida State had they won the game, but just not a great showing.
Yeah,
in the ACC championship.
So Alabama, the SEC champion, is the number 4 seed. So your matchups in the college football playoffs is going to be Michigan versus Alabama, Texas versus Washington. And, Robert mentioned it earlier. I think that those are some great matchups, but let's talk about this. The question I have for you is a question that everybody else is asking.
Yeah.
Did the committee get the right teams in?
Unpopular opinion. It depends on why they made their choice, but I'm actually going to say no. And it's not that I disagree with the teams, because I agree with it. That's probably the easiest way they could have done it, and not just absolutely have people burning cars on the side of the road and crap like that. Like, I get that. But if you're taking the most deserving teams, Florida State had to have been in there.
Yes, absolutely, because they went undefeated. They were the ACC champions.
Yes. But if you're taking the 4 best teams, Georgia should have been in there. So what they did is they kind of blended the two to kind of fit their own little criteria to kind of save a little bit. Now, look, I said this last week. There's going to be feelings hurt. There's going to be a team left out that shouldn't be left out. And unfortunately, I think there's 2 teams probably left out that shouldn't be left out. But I mean, that's what you had this year, man. This is a different year. This has never happened before. I mean, last year you had Alabama, Tennessee at 5-6 with 2 losses. It kind of took care of itself.
Yes, and that's what we thought would happen earlier this year, and not just us. Everybody did. Everybody said week after week, it's gonna take care of itself. It's gonna take care of itself. And in a way, yesterday it did, but at the same time, chaos happened.
Yeah, chaos happened because no chaos happened.
Yes.
So it left it down. It left it that, which, I mean, I guess Bama beating Georgia is chaos, but like in a way that wasn't really surprising. I mean, I went to my parents' party yesterday to watch the game, and he straight up asked me, and I don't know why I didn't say this in the podcast, but I was never more confident in Alabama winning that game than I was about 30 minutes before kickoff. I just nonchalantly was like, yeah, Bama's going to win this game. No doubt in my mind throughout the entire game did I ever change my mind either. I'm like, yeah, Bama's going to win. Something about that whole, I say it with Kiffin, like you can't beat your daddy sometimes. Like at the end of the day, your dad's going to just win. I almost feel the same way with Kirby and Nick. Like it's.
Well, I feel that with every Nick Saban former assistant.
Yeah.
I mean, up until the 2021 season, no former Saban assistant had ever beaten Saban, and then Jimbo did that in the Texas A&M game, and that opened the gate to where
Jimbo did it, and then Kirby did it.
But those are the only two that Steve Sarkisian did this year.
Yeah, Steve Sarkisian did it. So it's a little bit more. It's a little bit more usual, but like let's not undermine the fact that Nick Saban was having to find his offensive identity when Steve Sarkisian was on a second, third year starting quarterback. You know, they came in knowing what they were having to do, you know, what they could do, what they needed to do, vice versa. But I kind of want to spin that question back on you because now that you know my answer, I do think they did it right in terms of mitigating the damages. I guess that's the best way I can put it. But do you feel like they got the right four? I'm going to say the right four teams because I don't want to say the best four. I don't want to say the most deserving because I think it's a blend. I really do.
I agree with you. I think that they got the right four because of
that's right.
Because of them wanting to blend that. They didn't want to just make everybody mad, but they also couldn't put the best four in there. So let's have this conversation right here. Let's go, one by one, these teams right here that could have gotten in. So we got Michigan. They're in, they're a lock, right?
Yep.
Washington, they're in, they're a lock, right?
And they were like both. Everybody knew that those two teams were
locked. The winner of, well, as long as Michigan won, they were in, and then the winner of the Pac-12 was going to be in regardless, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So let's go with Texas. So before yesterday, would you have said that Texas deserved to be in?
Before yesterday, I don't know if I could have said that.
Okay, I agree. I don't think that they should have been in before yesterday either.
I've got my reasons. So I mean, and I don't mind sharing that now if you want me to.
Yeah, if you want to, go ahead. I mean, we got time here. So
they've got a great win over Bama, but at the time they were ranked 8th in the country. And then secondly, they had one of the worst losses out of any of the top 6 or 7 teams that were competing for the top 4 spots in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma's not a bad football team. They've won 10 games. I get that. But you got to remember, of the other teams that had losses, Texas's loss was one of the worst.
Exactly.
Period. So, I get it. They had the head-to-head to Bama, but then you lost to Oklahoma, who was an in-conference foe, who they lost another game after that. So, I mean,
not only that, I'll take it a step further. We talked about Washington not having a lot of impressive wins. Texas played in a lot of close conference games too. Now they kept winning, but they played in a lot of close games that they didn't just completely dominate like they probably should have.
Yep, and they were losing a lot of those games, like by halftime or even in the third quarter. You were just like, man, what the crap is Texas doing? But then they would open it up in the fourth quarter. They would always find a way. Like, I'm not going to knock a team for winning, regardless how they win.
I mean, a win is a win, especially a conference game.
I just had a lot of friends. To your question about Texas, I had a lot of people asking me, well, if Bama wanted in, they should have beat Texas. And I'm like, okay, but how can you not say the same thing to Texas about Oklahoma? Like, if Texas wanted to be in, they should have beat Oklahoma. But anyways, I don't know that I could have said Texas had earned it before yesterday.
All right,
and I want to get to Robert's point real quick.
Okay.
He thinks that they've got the best 4 teams in. He thinks it's a tough break for Florida State, which we all do, man. Like, that's not a surprise, but it's the right decision. And, he goes in to say that, thank God there's an SEC team in because now it's going to be a decent playoff. I just think it's hard. Like, if you're another team trying to win a national championship, let's say if you're Michigan, and you were to win a national championship and where the SEC got left out of the playoff, I know as a fan base, you're going to feel like you're a national champion. But for everybody else in the country outside looking in, nobody would credit you that national championship because you didn't beat the best and the best. Right or wrong?
I'll agree with that. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I agree with that. All right. But anyways, the fourth team that you had.
Well, hang on. So to Robert's comment there, I agree with everything he said except for the best 4 teams made it, and I'll get to that reason here in a minute.
Yeah,
but
I agree with that.
So still on Texas for a minute. So after yesterday and seeing how the rest of the games went, do you agree that they made the right decision putting Texas in?
Yeah, I actually think they were a lot.
I do as well. All right, so let's go with Alabama. So before yesterday, you would not have put them in, right? Because both of us thought that Georgia would beat Alabama in the SEC championship game.
Absolutely. And in fact, with them being placed at number 8, I didn't think there was a way, even if they won, to be put in the playoff.
I agree with you because I felt like that somehow, some way, they were going to backdoor Ohio State into the playoffs. And we'll get to Ohio State here in just a second. But
no, I actually had a different scenario.
Okay.
No, I thought Georgia had done enough to stay in regardless.
Okay, I'll agree with that too.
Yeah, I thought Georgia could have. Look, something that nobody's really ever talked about. No number 1 team going into conference championship Saturday has ever dropped completely out of the playoff. And Georgia not only fell out of the playoff, they fell to number 6 as a number 1 seed. That's unheard of. And so that's why I kind of thought even with a win, even with a loss technically to Bama, I thought they would still find a way in somehow.
So I felt like, after the game yesterday, I didn't think that there was any way that you could keep Alabama out because they lost. They lost to their one loss on the season was to the Big 12 champion, who is also in the playoffs. And then you just beat the number 1 team in the nation. So I think this committee was right putting Alabama in. Now we're going to get to some arguments that, some other folks might not agree with. So Florida State, and this is a tough one.
It's really not.
Well, I'm going to make the argument the reason why I feel like it was a tough one, because I agree. I don't think that they should have been in after what all transpired. But
yeah,
let's go back a couple of weeks. Florida State with Jordan Travis, if they win the ACC championship, are they in?
Yes.
Yes, I agree. I had Florida State in my playoffs at the beginning of the season. I said Florida State was in. As soon as Jordan Travis went down, and people have made this argument over and over again, well, Ohio State was a 4 seed with a 3rd-string quarterback and still ended up winning the national championship. Okay, but things were different back at that point. You didn't have, 5, 6, 7 deserving teams, or I guess technically 8 deserving teams going in. You're not going to have a team that lost and is not playing their best ball right now get into that 4-team playoffs because they're not one of the best 4 teams. So I want to hear your thoughts on it, but I do think that Florida State, it was the committee was right in leaving them out, although they were very deserving because all they did was go undefeated.
What I'm going to say is about to get very, very real very quickly. And the fact that maybe they didn't have a loss in the column, but arguably they still had the biggest loss out of any of those 8 teams getting in that play, in that Final Four spot. And that's losing your Heisman contending quarterback, Jordan Travis. And if you disagree with that, then you don't believe that he was that important to your team, and you're wrong. He was. Okay. Secondly, if I'm a Florida State fan, I am blaming the ACC more than anybody because you fell out of the playoff because of how piss poor your conference was this year. And I get it. People are going to say, well, they were, 7-5 versus the SEC this year. Okay. Look at the games. All right. Florida State beat LSU with Jordan Travis, and I'll grant you that. But the other games you're comparing is Clemson to South Carolina, a South Carolina team that's just not good.
South Carolina to North Carolina.
Florida State to Florida. You're talking about losing record type teams, dude. And it's just not going to hold up. And it didn't hold up, period. You're talking about a conference that your second place team lost to Kentucky in week 13. I am blaming the ACC if I'm a Florida State fan Honestly, more than I'm blaming the committee. And that's if I'm the athletic director of Florida State. I think Florida State came out bashing the committee, and he should. I don't disagree. But you have to look at your own conference too and understand that there's there was 5 conference champions. There's only 4 spots. Naturally, you're going to take the best 4 conference champions in those 4 spots. And that's what they did. Okay? If you're comparing the SEC to the ACC, I mean, come on. Like, it's not even close. I'm sorry to hurt your feelings, but that's what the committee did. And Florida State, unfortunately, they lose out on that argument literally 9 times out of 10. And that's just, it is what it is. I hate it. I really do. Jordan Travis, I hate it for him more than anything, but it really is a testament that the committee thinks that highly of a kid that can actually change the outcome of a team so dramatically. You know what I mean? So, but and again, and we've said it, their defense is good. The problem is it's a team sport. It doesn't matter how good your defense is if your offense can't score the ball against a decent defense. Louisville does not have a decent defense, and they scored 1 touchdown against Louisville. So I mean, that's just, and that might have been off a turnover. I can't remember. So I mean, either way, that was my thoughts about Florida State. I didn't know if you really fully clearly got your thoughts about it or your opinion about it, but I do want to hear it.
Yeah, I think that you were 100% correct on that. I mean, the way that everything else played out this year, the 4 best teams that they put in, the 4 teams that they put in were the teams that should be in, and unfortunately, in this case, Florida State was not one of those teams.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's very unfortunate, the Jordan Travis injury, but it's.
I guess to make it even more clear to everybody listening, if you were to give Florida State, and I would even venture to say even with Jordan Travis, but for dang sure without Jordan Travis, because that's the scenario that we're in, right? If you were to give them the schedule of Alabama's or Michigan's or Washington's, do you seriously think they're still undefeated at the end of the season?
Probably not.
I don't. In fact, I would bet money on it, like 100% they wouldn't be. And at the end of the day, that is the more clear reason why they are not in the top 4.
Yep, I agree. So let's move on to a team that, if we were putting the best teams in there, they are clearly in. Georgia. All Georgia had to do was win yesterday. I still believe that Georgia is the best team in the country, even after getting beat by Alabama yesterday. But they could not put Georgia in after Alabama won and after how the rest of the teams played out yesterday.
Mm-mm. They really needed Florida State to lose, or
they really needed Texas to lose.
If they go in knowing that they were going to lose, they needed Texas to lose too. Yeah, I would agree with you. But it's still crazy to me to think that Georgia, I think, had like a 99% chance to make the playoffs going into yesterday as a number 1 seed, and then they only lose by 3, and what was a great game, and now they're not even at the 5th seed, man. They're at the 6th seed behind Florida.
I really think they only did that just because Florida State was still undefeated.
Yeah, and which is crazy to me, man. You're rewarding a team for having a weaker schedule, and that pisses me off, like to another level that really rubs me the wrong way. But then again, Georgia, man, that was a playoff game, and we all kind of felt that way too. I mean, kind of the same thing with like Michigan and Ohio State. The only difference is there's a lot more meat to the bone on Georgia, Alabama than there was with Michigan, Ohio State. The reason why Michigan, Ohio State carries so much weight is because who the hell else do they play during the season other than Penn State?
Yep.
And Ohio State fans would argue Notre Dame, but okay, what did Notre Dame do for the rest of the season after you beat them?
I think Notre Dame went 8-4 this year,
in which you barely beat Notre Dame, might I add. In fact, some would even argue that you shouldn't have beat Notre Dame. Because was that the game Notre Dame?
Notre Dame had 10 players on the field for like 3 straight plays.
The final 3 games or 3 plays. Yeah. So I mean, But, they would argue, okay, well, we've gotten better as the season progresses. Thank you, because that's exactly what Alabama did. Okay?
Exactly.
They lost to Texas in week 2, and they have gotten better. And Jalen Milroe has gotten better since week 2 of the season. And, but that's why I say it's a little different in the fact that there's just so much more meat on the bone. Because if a team takes a loss in the SEC championship, they've at least played other top tier competition, man. I don't know how I've explained it. What you got? Alabama, Georgia, 1 and 2, as far as SEC. You got Missouri in there, like the 9th team in the country. That's a top 10 team, which would be kind of equivalent to Penn State, right? But then you got Ole Miss, LSU, Tennessee in the top 20, basically. Who else does the Big Ten have? Iowa, and that's it.
Yeah, nobody else in the Big Ten was anywhere near the top 25.
That's what I'm saying. And 3 of the best teams are in one conference or one division. So, as an SEC fan, Robert says, I'm grateful that the college football committee did not put in Florida State. And I don't even think that's as an SEC fan, man. I think everybody, in fact, I think they're doing Florida State a favor, man. If they were to put Florida State in and then they get walloped by 50 in the semifinal game, 1, that's going to make the committee look terrible. 2, that's going to make Florida State look terrible.
Mm-hmm.
like, let's just be honest. Look at TCU last year. Now, granted, they beat Michigan somehow in the semifinal, but then they get destroyed by 60 against, Georgia. Kind of same thing. So I think they're doing Florida State a favor, hindsight, even though that sounds really bad if you're a Florida State fan listening in, because you're like, how in the hell is that a favor? But now Florida State has the opportunity to, I don't know, maybe play Ohio State, play Georgia. In my opinion, that's as good as a playoff game, even though you're not getting the big trophy. But that's the same type of caliber team that you would be playing in the Final Four. And now you get to see how you match up without, I guess, the consequences that would come with the playoff loss. I don't know.
Yeah. So the Georgia thing here, this is why I disagreed with Robert earlier that the 4 best teams got in. Because, I mentioned I still think Georgia is the best team in college football right now overall. But they could not very well put Georgia into the playoffs after everything else that happened. Because are you going to sit here and tell me that Alabama is going to be left out of the playoffs even though they just beat Georgia? You're going to put Georgia in ahead of Alabama. There's no way that the committee could do that with a head-to-head. So that is the only reason that Georgia was left out, is because of the way that everything played out in that. Because it still baffles me that Georgia did fall from number 1 to number 6 the way that they did, but that's kind of the way that the cookie crumbled. I mean, I hate it for Georgia because I think that they are deserving to get in there, but also, we talked about the ACC and their scheduling. Look at Georgia. I mean, this was not their fault. This was the SEC's fault because of Oklahoma and Texas coming into the conference next year. But Georgia had Oklahoma scheduled going into this season. They were supposed to play against Oklahoma, but because they didn't want to affect the scheduling going forward in the SEC, because you have to play a home and home to be able to have that.
Well, see, and that's what costed them. So, like Paul Feinbaum said it last night. That's, Georgia could easily blame Greg Sankey because instead of doing a home and home, they could have made that Oklahoma game a neutral site game like they do with all the other games.
Yes.
And then it could have been a one-time deal. And that's what they probably should have done, hindsight, right? But to your point, they couldn't do the home and home because they couldn't return serve on that game till like 2032 or something like that. I think we discussed that, how they would have, had the next opportunity to do it. But so yeah, to your point, canceling that Oklahoma game has came back and really haunted the Georgia Bulldogs.
Because instead of playing Oklahoma, you played Ball State. So that really hurt Georgia. But then again, all Georgia did was win. We mentioned that all Florida State did was win this year. All Georgia did was win until that Alabama game yesterday.
Which is crazy because, again, as a Georgia fan, you go into the SEC championship game knowing that you need to win, but you're like, okay, but if we lose, we're undefeated in the season. We're in the best conference. We have a pretty good feeling. I would like to remind the folks last year when TCU lost in their Big 12 championship game, and they still made the playoff. In fact, didn't even drop a spot. And that just goes to show that when other teams in the college football that, are up to par, the consequences are a little bit different. Last year there was only 4 teams competitive that had 0 to 1 losses.
Well, I was going to say, you mentioned it, that the number 5 and 6 teams in the playoff rankings were Alabama and Tennessee, and both of them had 2 losses.
Exactly. But this year, things are different, man. You had 8 teams going into the final week, 8 Power 5, not Liberty, right?
Yeah, not Liberty.
Teams that were going in with 1 or 0 losses. So it's just a lot different. But if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm pretty upset, man. There's not been a deficit like that in a game where you only lose by 3. It's not like you were just dogged, right?
Yeah.
And they dropped from 1 to 6 because arguably, if you kind of return serve in Georgia's favor, you line them up against Washington or Michigan or Texas. Do you think they're a better team?
Yes.
Honestly, you probably think yes. But this is where, unfortunately, the results on the field matter. Not unfortunately, that's how it should be. But people were begging for 12 teams. It's going to be 12 teams next year. And that's going to be a good and a bad thing, in my opinion. Just like the 4-team playoff, honestly, was a good and a bad thing because if SEC gets more than 1 team in every year, I think people are going to quickly find out just how good the competition is in the SEC.
Well, all right, so let's get back to the 12-team playoff here in just a minute because I do want to discuss that just a little bit. But we got 2 more teams I want to talk about real quick. So, and it shouldn't take but just a minute. So, Ohio State, after they lost to Michigan, they were out. In my opinion, there was no way that they were going to get in. Because of the schedule that they played, and you lost to Michigan head-to-head on the field. You don't get that opportunity to play in a Big Ten championship game. I know they made it. Do it.
Lost to them 3 years in a row.
Yeah, 3 years in a row. And then I know that they made it in last year after not playing in the conference championship, but we mentioned it. They only had 1 loss, and then the number 5 and 6 teams had 2 losses. So that's how they got their way in. So, in my opinion, Ohio State wasn't getting in this year. Then Oregon. All Oregon had to do was win. They lost to Washington. Credit to Washington. And that knocked Oregon out.
Yep. So, no, Ohio State, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, they just didn't have enough meat on the bone outside of the game.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, that's why the game means so much in the Big Ten, is because that is – quite frankly, that is the Big Ten championship game.
And that probably will be going forward. I know you've got teams like Oregon, Washington coming in that can also compete for that now. But with the divisions going away, that you could see Ohio State and Michigan play each other at some point in that year. It's a chance that they won't be playing at the end of the year anymore. They might be moving that game like towards the middle of the season, because if you left it at the end of the season, you could see those 2 teams play and then turn around and play again that following week for the Big Ten championship game, and they don't want that to happen.
Yeah,
but it's still a possibility that you could see those 2 teams face off again in the Big Ten championship game.
Absolutely. Oregon slapping themselves in the face because they lost to the same team twice, and unfortunately don't even get the opportunity to play another team to redeem it. That Bo Nix might have lost the Heisman that day, unfortunately, to Jay Daniels. Jay Daniels probably should win it anyways. But now that Bo Nix is not a conference champion, and he was shut out in the first half, really, in my opinion. I think that might have locked it up for Jay Daniels. So Oregon had kind of like a double whammy there. They triple whammy, however you want to call it. They missed the playoff. They aren't conference champions, and Bo Nix might have lost the Heisman that night. A rough night for Oregon. But Ohio State, I agree, man. That was a play-in game, because there's just not enough meat on the bone for the Big Ten. Kind of the same thing with the ACC. Big Ten, outside of 3 teams, and they're all in the same division. There's just no – the competition is just not there, man. Maryland's not great. Indiana's not good. Wisconsin's not great. Nebraska's not good. Just a lot of very mid teams in the Big Ten. And that's why it costed Ohio State so much. That's why I told you that I didn't understand why they only put them at 6. You're talking about Ohio State team that was ranked 3rd, I think, or maybe 2nd. Was Ohio State above Michigan when they played?
Yes, Ohio State was second. I think Michigan was third.
After the loss, they fall to 6, right? 2-6, and then you got Georgia that falls from 1-6. Like, yeah, I mean, it's crazy, dude. And that's with a better resume. But overall, Alabama gets in, Texas gets in, Michigan and Washington were locks. The biggest thing that I think pointed out to me when they were kind of doing the side-by-side comparison is Alabama had a number 5 strength of schedule ranking. Florida State had a 55th ranked strength of schedule ranking. And that just goes to my point that I've been trying to say all afternoon. And so if I'm Florida State fans, if I'm the athletic director of Florida State, I am furious at the ACC that they couldn't hold up their own to kind of make you guys look a little bit better. And then also, even though it's not in the column, but Florida State probably had the biggest loss out of any team that we're talking about here today. And it's unfortunate, but, you know, not that it really would have mattered because it was number 5 and number 6. Remember, the committee's done this before. They knocked Tennessee below Alabama, even with the head-to-head win, because we lost Hendon Hooker last year. So it's not necessarily something new that they've done. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
But
so real quick, let's touch on the 12-team playoffs before we talk about New Year's Six bowls, because the New Year's Six bowls have been announced now. The teams that are in that, I've got that pulled up. So the 12-team playoff. You mentioned that it's got its positives, it's got its negatives, and all that. The thing that I'm gonna enjoy about the 12-team playoff is the fact that yes, you're still going to have controversy around that 10, 11, 12 spot about teams that are deserving to go in and all that, but you're not going to have what you had this year where a undefeated conference champion is going to be left out. Because all 5 conference champions next season will be in the college football playoffs, regardless of who it is. So, like, for instance, last year, Kansas State beat TCU in the Big 12 championship game. TCU would have still made it in because that was their one loss, but Kansas State would also be in because they're the Big 12 champion. So this year, you would have the 4 teams that are in there. They would all be in. Plus, you would have Florida State in as the ACC champion. So you wouldn't have that debate. Then your highest ranked group of 5 team, in this case, it would be Liberty this year, would also be in. And then it's just a matter of getting the 6 best at-large teams. That would be Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State, Missouri, Ole Miss, Oklahoma. No, sorry, not Oklahoma. I've got it up here. Yeah, Penn State. Penn State would be the other one.
I would like to talk about the daggum New Year's Six because I just took a look at them for the first time, and oh my god, dude, you would honestly think they're playoff games.
That's the truth. So let's go down in order as far as dates. So the first one is going to be on Friday, December the 29th, the Cotton Bowl. You've got Missouri against Ohio State. I love this matchup. Absolutely love it because you've got Ohio State, a team that is strong in the run. They're also decent in the pass too, going up against a really good Missouri offense with Cody Schrader and Brady Cook, along with Luther Burden out there. So you've got 2 decent quarterbacks going against 2 pretty good running backs. I forget who Ohio State's running back is off the top of my head.
Trevion Henderson and somebody else.
All right, thank you. Then you've got Marvin Harrison Jr. against Luther Burden III.
If they play.
That's true. Some of these guys could opt out.
It's New Year's Six. They better not.
I agree. Again, and then there's 2 very comparable defenses playing in this game. Ohio State has a much improved defense over what they've had over the past few years. And a Missouri defense that, although they've been vulnerable at times, has stood up whenever they've needed to this year.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love this matchup here.
And we're not picking the games today. We're just kind of previewing them. I love that Missouri, even with Georgia not making the playoff, Missouri still found a way, and Ole Miss, by the way. Remember that conversation we had last week on who gets the Well, they both get it. So I think they heard our argument, and I think they agree, because I'm telling you, man, Ole Miss's only 2 losses of the season were to Bama and Georgia.
Yep.
And Missouri, even though they were kind of the Cinderella story, right? They were 10-2 as well, but their second loss, because they both lost to Georgia, but it was to LSU, which is a little bit worse of a loss. But they had some pretty good wins in there too. So I think it's really cool that they both got in. Ole Miss is playing Penn State. And what we have literally been saying all day, those two teams are so comparable. They're like in the same position in their respective conferences together. And so this would be a good one. I think, honestly, and I hate to say this as an SEC fan, but I think this matchup might even favor Penn State a little bit more than Ole Miss.
I'm actually going to disagree with you on this because Penn State does not have a passing game. That's the reason why they could not beat Michigan and Ohio State this year, is because they don't have a passing game. Ole Miss's strength is on defense is against the run. They're very, very suspect against the pass, but their run defense is pretty good. So I think that Ole Miss has got a bit of advantage there because all they have to do is stop the run and force Penn State to pass the ball. And I don't know if Penn State can do it. Now, on the other side of it, Penn State has also got a very good defense, and we've seen Ole Miss against good defenses this year, Alabama and Georgia, not do that well. So I think it is going to be a low-scoring game, but I think it kind of favors Ole Miss a little bit.
I think you're right. When it comes to being one-dimensional or two-dimensional, Drew Aller has not proven that he can, take a game over and win with his arm, whereas Jackson Dart has been able to be a little bit more dynamic and kind of win a game, even when Quinshon Judkins doesn't necessarily have his best game. So I agree with you. But let's talk about the last game, that Orange Bowl. Tennessee was in it last year. You remember how I was telling you that they might have been trying to do Florida State a favor? I lied.
No. all they did was just put them up against Georgia.
Yep, Florida State versus Georgia. Arguably you're pissed off that you're not in the playoff. I can promise you Georgia's just as pissed off. And a game against, this is going to be, this is going to be a good game. Florida State has, if they want to prove why they should have been in the playoff, this is the game to do it.
Absolutely.
Like 100%. Back it up. If you're going to talk all the crap, not crap, I get it. It's kind of like justified. But you better have the team ready and followed up and play Georgia, the best game you've ever had, to prove why you should have been in that Final Four.
Absolutely. And I don't want to offend Florida State fans whenever I say this, but let's look at the last New Year's Six Bowl, because there is one more. You've got the Fiesta Bowl is
my bad.
Liberty against Oregon. I think that they should have swapped the teams that played in these two games. Like I said, I'm not trying to offend Florida State here, but put Florida State against Liberty and put Georgia against Oregon. I think those.
Why is that?
I think those would have been a little bit better matchups. I think.
Wait, I have to say you're trying to help Florida State at this point.
Well, in a way, yes, but I get your point to it as well. This is the game that Florida State needs to prove themselves against Georgia.
Yeah, because if they're going to get mad at us flexing that the SEC is the best, then I want to see them play the SEC so that I would shut up about it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But also, Josh Pate has said it, and I haven't come out and said it, but I've thought it. Oregon is that one team that I felt like could compete with Georgia and give them a run for their money in the playoffs. I really, really wanted to see the Georgia-Oregon matchup.
Fair enough.
I'm not really saying that I wanted Florida State to play Liberty to give them an easier game. I guess I should have I should have come out and said that. I would have much rather seen the Georgia-Oregon matchup. I just feel like that the way that these teams match up, you're going to have two blowout games here in the New Year's Six, because I think that Georgia is just they're overmatched against Florida State right now. Now, I would love to be wrong. I would love to see Florida State come in and, prove that they should have been in the playoffs. I would love to see them come in and beat Georgia. I just don't see that happening right now. And then I think that Oregon is just way overmatched against Liberty right now. Liberty is a very good team. I've watched them play a few times this year, and they're very good. You got a guy that should have been at Tennessee, Kaden Salter. I don't know if I said his first name. Caden Salter. What he was, let's see, he was committed to Tennessee at one point, right?
I know about this story if you want me to tell it.
Okay, go ahead.
So Caden Salter committed and was even on campus his spring semester, but unfortunately couldn't stay off the green stuff and got caught.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, he was actually on Tennessee's roster and then got kicked off. I forgot.
So he got kicked off for team violations and not following the law because he went to jail twice. And so I actually don't fault Tennessee at all for letting that kid go, because I mean, if he's not mature enough to think about himself and sport, the game itself, and rather he's kind of wanting to just party and kind of not have his mind in the right mindset, it's hard to kind of get him out of that. So Kaden Salter got let go from Tennessee. Now, what did he do? He put his head down, went to Liberty, and got back to work. And I credit the kid for that.
Yeah,
he could have folded. He could have folded and been the next Harrison Bailey. Like, where is he at? You know what I mean?
Back up.
That's right. So he went to work, and now he's leading a team that's undefeated, and I credit him that. Because that showed me that the kid does have it at heart. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And but we're gonna find out now. What's crazy is there's 4 SEC teams in the New Year's Six bowls, and that's not even including LSU or Tennessee. You know what I mean? Like it. So just the level of competition, and we're gonna find out. We're going to find out if Florida State can compete with Georgia, because if they can, by all means, the committee was completely wrong. Or if Ohio State, Missouri. Not that this necessarily has as much to do with the playoff, the Final Four, but more so the depth and the SEC's competition versus the Big Ten. You know what I mean? Kind of the same thing with Penn State versus Ole Miss. We're going to find out. And we're going to find out pretty quickly coming up in, 3-4 weeks?
Something like that.
4 weeks. I think it's the end of December, man. What a fun season it has been. What a fun season it has been.
But before we close out, I just want to name the bowls that SEC teams are waiting to hear if they're going to be in or not, because they have not been announced yet. So just looking through this, there is the Birmingham Bowl that SEC team could possibly be in. Let's see. You also got the Duke's Mayo Bowl. I have heard that Kentucky is the top candidate for the Duke's Mayo Bowl as of right now. You've got the Texas Bowl. I haven't heard a team yet that will be in that one. The Gator Bowl, Taxslayer Gator Bowl. I have heard Tennessee's name mentioned there, but that's not the top one that I have heard. You got the Music City Bowl. I do know that Tennessee has asked not to be in that one. I'm not sure who else has said that. Or
Tennessee should be in Florida, somewhere in Florida.
I agree. See, you've got the Liberty Bowl. SEC is going to have a team in there, and then the two bowls in Florida that they're going to have some higher ranked teams. So I think one of these is going to be Tennessee. The other one is going to be probably LSU. Is you have the ReliaQuest. That's the one that I have heard Tennessee mention in the most. Is the ReliaQuest Bowl, formerly the Outback Bowl, and then the Citrus Bowl. I believe that one will probably be LSU.
Imagine going from the Orange Bowl to the Citrus Bowl.
Let's do it. Let's put Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl, man.
Yeah, why not, dude? The only bowl games that I'm seeing so far on the ESPN app is you got Oklahoma, Arizona in the Alamo Bowl.
That is a low-key good game right there. That's a good match.
That's going to be ACC versus Big 12. You've got – that's not ACC versus Big 12, is it? Yeah, I guess.
Arizona, Oklahoma?
Oh, that's Pac-12 versus Big 12.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And then you've got Memphis versus Iowa State in the Liberty Bowl. So the Liberty Bowl is taken with Memphis, Iowa State.
Okay.
But that's the only thing I'm seeing here on the ESPN app. They will slowly be announcing them, I think, as the day goes on, or maybe even as the week goes on.
Yeah.
But the New Year's Six is set, and there are 4 SEC teams representing in the New Year's Six, man. It's crazy. The chaos happened in a way that we never thought it would.
Yeah.
And that's not in the terms of upsets, but in the terms of lack of. And thus you had 8 teams at the end of the year all fighting for 4 places. And that's never a good recipe.
Yeah. But the SEC is not the best conference, even though they've got 4 of them in the New Year's Six.
Hence the sarcasm.
Yeah. So, guys, that is the show for this week. So, just giving you a preview of next week. We will have the bowl games at that point. So, we will tell you the SEC teams that are in bowl games, which bowl they're going to, their opponent, and all that. We will probably start our recap of the season, where we take our preseason predictions that we both posted on TikTok and compare them to how the teams actually did. There's going to be some that are about the same and some of them that we were way wrong on, just to give you a little teaser there. And I think next week we will be able to predict a couple of bowl games. We'll go on a week-by-week basis of those based on who's playing in the coming week. And then we are going to start transitioning over to some basketball. The big transition will take place probably after Christmas and New Year's, whenever conference games start heating up. But we are going to start the transition over to basketball season, talking about some of those games. So
it's not been a great start to the season. If we just go ahead and start talking about it a little bit.
Yeah, we can talk about it a little bit here.
They started out 4-3, which is not what the folks wanted, but people got to understand that we played the number 1 team in Purdue, number 5 team in Kansas, and number 17 team in North Carolina.
Well, at the time, Purdue was number 2, Kansas was number 1.
Yeah, I mean, you played 3 ranked teams right off the bat, and I'm so okay with it. It set the bar for Rick Barnes and this basketball team to kind of understand where we are and where we need to get better, rather than just rolling through an easy cupcake schedule to get to SEC, not knowing really where your flaws are at.
And I want to touch on that North Carolina game for just a second. So
let's do it.
Those that watched the North Carolina game, it was ugly, and I mean ugly for a good portion of that game. I mean, there was a few times where I was ready to cut it off, man. It was bad, but Tennessee at one point in that game was down by 26. All they did was bring it back and get beat by 8, I think it was. And Dalton Connect, dude, he had 37 points in that game, which is the most points that any non-conference player has scored in the Dean Dome in North Carolina. So what I mean by that is, like, it is the most
somebody outside the ACC.
Yes, it is the most by anybody that's outside the ACC. Has ever scored in a game in the Dean Dome. I mean, Dalton Connect was on a different level in that game. Josiah Jordan-James had a fantastic game as well. Tennessee has got to have they got to have a well-rounded effort from each player. You had a lot of guys that did not play well in that North Carolina game, and that is why the game ended up the way that it did. But I do still believe, I'm going out on a limb here, because Tennessee has never made a Final Four in men's basketball. But Tennessee is a Final Four team as far as their overall. When they're at their best, they are a Final Four team, if not a national championship contender.
And I think I can agree with that. The problem is we need to see them at their best.
You're absolutely right on that.
You see some minutes where they're at their best, but we need to see 40 total minutes of them at their best. And they've got a chance to come home and kind of right the ship. Play George Mason Tuesday, December 5th, 6:30 p.m. And then I believe they play Illinois this Saturday. So y'all tune in. If you are basketball fans, tune in. The boys are, yeah, exactly. I know. I'm a Tennessee fan. I'll be tuned in. I didn't personally play basketball, but I do watch it a little bit. And look, we need to support the guys, because right now everybody's kind of shaking their head. They don't know really what to expect, because we really expected this team to take off like a rocket to begin the season. And unfortunately, we've had some really good competition. Rick Barnes said it. They played the 3 best centers in college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, Zach Edey, Hunter Dickinson, and I forget the guy from North Carolina, but you're not gonna face guys like that night in and night out, and exactly. that's the one weakness that Tennessee has on their team, is they don't have that just dominant big man. You've got Jonas Adu, who is very comparable, and he's going to do well against SEC big men. You've got Kobe Owaka, who has actually been hurt and was hurt in that Purdue game. He still came in and did his best against Zach Edey, but he wasn't 100% healthy. And you've got some good young talent on that team in JP Estrella and Cade Phillips, but they're young, they're raw. It's going to take some time for them to come in. So, I mean, that is the one weakness on Tennessee's team right now that they need to work on a little bit if they're going to have postseason success later in this season. But, Tennessee's still projected to win the SEC at the beginning of the season, and they very well could. So, it's going to be a fun season because Rick Barnes, he's going to do what he needs to do this year.
That's right. And sidetrack back to recruiting / portal news. Got some good news. Dylan Sampson has included Vol football back into his bio on Instagram. So maybe bag.
I think it was just getting NIL money.
Bag secured. I think Dylan Sampson is going to be RB1 coming next year, or maybe he heard that Jalen Wright was going to officially declare for the draft. Either one, because I think Dylan Sampson, kind of like Jalen Wright, doesn't really want to sit behind a guy, especially in your junior year coming up. And so he kind of wanted to know if he was going to be the guy or not. And I think he got his answer. I think he may be staying. That's going to be some big time news. But all that and more coming up on the Vol Fanatic Show.
Yeah, one more player that has entered the portal, and I wish him nothing but the best because he has had a rough last couple of years in Knoxville. Warren Burrell, he went out in the Pittsburgh game last year with a season-ending injury, had to have surgery, and
it was a wild way for it to end, and I hated it for him. He got cooked in the Purdue game. Let's just be honest. And then he came out the next season in hopes of vastly improving and then had that injury, which he never really came back from.
And he never did. And he had guys that ended up stepping up in front of him this year that were just a little bit better. So, I mean, it's a tough way for him to end his career in Knoxville. But, hey, I wish him nothing but the best wherever he decides to go.
Absolutely. It's that time of year, man. We're going to be seeing some names. I mean, I've seen some speculation that Danico Slaughter is going to do the same. And is that really a testament to the defense or the coaching, or is that really just a testament to the younger guys that are stepping up and they're kind of seeing the writing on the wall and the fact that they don't want to have to compete that hard against a freshman to get some starting time. So just stay tuned. We'll try to keep you guys up to date as it comes along. But absolutely, guys, just remember, don't hate on these kids. They're doing what's best for them and their future and what's best for their families. So keep that in mind when they go to make a big time decision like this.
Yeah, and throughout the off season, we're gonna give you guys some news, transfer portal, recruiting, stuff like that. It's not gonna be our main focus, but we are gonna give y'all some updates on that. But really, we're just gonna talk about the sport at hand. But football, that is the main focus for everybody. So we are going to keep you guys in the loop on a lot of this stuff. Like Will Rogers has entered the portal out of Mississippi State.
That's right.
There's some other names that have entered the portal. Juice Wells out in South Carolina, he's entered the portal. And, tough break for him too because he had a fantastic year last year and then ended up being hurt most of the year this year. So,
I do kind of want to end the show on a question.
Okay.
Who do you want to see Tennessee play in the Bulls game? Regardless of where it's at, who is the opponent that you want to play?
I want to see Tennessee versus North Carolina in the ReliaQuest Bowl.
Oh, God dang it. Be fun for once. I want to see us play Clemson again, dude.
And that was going to be my second team. I was going to say Tennessee versus Clemson as well, but I want to see North Carolina against Tennessee. Now, the one thing that I might not like as much is, it's almost a guarantee that Drake May is going to enter the draft. So North Carolina is going to be down. But at the same time, I want to see Tennessee win a bowl game. So give me North Carolina without Drake May.
And that would be a revenge game. Remember the Music City Bowl when we played North Carolina back in 2010? think it was 2010.
It was either Lane Kiffin's one year or it was
like
I think it was Lane Kiffin's one year, or it could have been Derek Dooley's first year, something like that. Or did Derek Dooley even make a bowl?
Dude, I don't know. I don't want to talk about it. I just know that would be kind of a cool matchup because it has not necessarily happened recently, but it would be a revenge game a little bit. And no, okay, well, fair. We both have our teams out there that we want to play, and I just want to play. Look, give me Clemson and the Citrus Bowl this time. All right, we had the Orange Bowl. Now give me the Citrus Bowl. Orange teams. No, I'm joking, guys. I appreciate you tuning in. Robert says, great show, guys. Enjoyed it. I appreciate you for being tuned in the entire time. Once again, hour and almost 50 minutes into the show. And that is a stamp on the regular season of 2023 for college football.
Yep. It's been fun, and I'm going to be ready for a wild postseason of college football this year.
That's right. Bring on Texas and Oklahoma.
Absolutely. So, guys, appreciate y'all tuning in. Y'all have a great week this week. Also, be tuning in next week. Only one football game. We got the Army-Navy game. So
that's right.
I normally tune into that one. We'll see what happens in that one. I mean, it's the Battle of America in all honesty.
And you'll see some slick uniforms.
Absolutely. I've seen Army's uniform already. I haven't seen Navy's yet. They look awesome, man.
They will be slick, as they should. So,
guys, have a great week. Skylar, you have a great week. We'll be hollering at you sometime this week. And, guys, go Big Orange.
Go Big Orange.